I remember the way the chandelier caught the light that evening, crystal, fracturing the glow into 1,000 glittering lies. It was our engagement party, though you wouldn't have known it from the way Julian's hand lingered on Clara's waist, his laugh a little too loud at her whispered jokes. I stood there, in a dress that cost more than most people's rent, sipping champagne that tasted like vinegar, and wondered if anyone would notice if I slipped out the back and never returned. But I stayed. Of course I did. That was my first mistake. The fire started in the library, or at least that's what the investigators would later claim. One moment, I was forcing a smile at some senator's wife, and the next, the air was thick with the scent of smoke, acrid and hungry. Panic slithered through the ballroom. But Julian? He didn't even glance my way. He grabbed Clara's arm, his mouth moving fast with words I couldn't hear over the screaming. And then they were running, toward the grand staircase, toward safety, toward everything I wasn't. I called his name. Once, twice, my voice cracking like the beams above me. He didn't turn, not even when the ceiling groaned, not even when the heat seared my skin raw. The last thing I saw before the world went black was the way his fingers tightened around her wrist, possessive, protective, like she was something precious, like I was already ash. The pain was worse than I could have imagined. Fire doesn't kill you quickly, it takes its time, savouring the way your flesh blisters, the way your lungs collapse under the weight of smoke. I thought, this is it. This is how I die. Not in some grand tragedy, not with weeping loved ones at my bedside, but alone in a room full of people who'd already forgotten me. And then, nothing. I woke up screaming, but no sound came out. White walls, the sterile bite of antiseptic, and a voice like ground glass. You're alive. Barely. Adrian Voss loomed over me, his eyes colder than the IV drip in my arm. He didn't offer comfort, didn't tell me it would be okay, just handed me a mirror and let me stare at the stranger staring back. My face was gone. My life was gone. But the fury? That burned brighter than ever. I should have been grateful. That's what the nurses murmured when they thought I couldn't hear. Lucky to be alive. Lucky he saved her. But luck had nothing to do with it. Adrian didn't rescue me out of kindness. He saw what I was. A weapon wrapped in scar tissue, a ghost with a score to settle. And Julian? He was already giving interviews about his unbearable grief. I watched him on the hospital TV, his eyes dry, his jaw set in the perfect portrait of loss. The headline beneath him read, "Heiress perishes in tragic accident." I crushed the remote in my hand. Tragic? No. Accident? We'd see about that. The funeral was a masterpiece of hypocrisy. White lilies piled high enough to drown in, every petal crisp and perfect like the image Julian wanted to project. Mourners in black couture dabbed at dry eyes while whispering stock market tips. And there, front and centre, stood my parents, their grief polished to a high shine for the cameras, their tears as real as the eulogy Julian delivered through that practiced, trembling voice of his. I watched from the back row, shrouded in a veiled hat Adrian had insisted I wear. "Let them look right through you," he'd said. And they did. No one glanced twice at the pale woman in the oversized sunglasses, her gloved hands clenched around a programme that bore my own name in elegant script. Evelyn Marie van der Linde, it read, beloved daughter, devoted fiancée. I nearly laughed. If I'd been any of those things, would I be standing here now, breathing in the stench of their perfume and lies? Julian broke down halfway through his speech, a stagger so artful I wondered if he'd rehearsed it in the mirror. The crowd ate it up. Cameras flashed like fireflies, capturing every performative tremor of his lower lip. Clara rushed to his side, her fingers stroking his back in slow, possessive circles. That's when I saw it. The ring. My grandmother's emerald, the one Julian had sworn was locked in the family vault until our wedding day. It glittered on Clara's finger like a dare, like a secret they weren't even bothering to hide anymore. Adrian's hand closed around my elbow before I could move. "Not here," he murmured, his breath cool against my ear. "Not like this." I let him steer me out, past the weeping strangers and the paparazzi lurking by the hearses. The moment the car door shut, I ripped off the veil. "They're already spending my inheritance." Adrian didn't flinch. "You're dead to them. Legally, financially, it's all theirs now." He handed me a tablet, the screen glowing with news alerts. Julian's face beamed beside a headline. "Van der Linde heiress fortune to fund fiancé's political bid." The numbers blurred, the zeros piled up like bones. Every dollar my grandfather had built, every share I'd been promised, gone, liquidated, stolen. "They think they've won," I said. Adrian smiled, slow and sharp as a scalpel. "Let them." The car pulled away from the cemetery, tyres crunching over gravel. I didn't look back. The girl they'd buried today, the one they'd loved, the one they'd betrayed, wasn't me anymore. She was just kindling. The penthouse smelled like money and something darker. Whiskey, maybe, or the metallic tang of fresh ink on a contract no one was meant to see. Adrian stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights painting his silhouette in cold blues and whites. He didn't turn when I entered, just gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit." I didn't. The leather folder on the desk was open, its contents laid out like a surgeon's tools. A new birth certificate, a passport, bank statements, with more zeros than I'd ever seen attached to my name. Or rather, her name. Lydia Voss, age 28, orphaned heiress to a fortune that didn't exist until Adrian willed it into being. "This is your life now," he said, finally turning. His cufflinks caught the light, tiny silver skulls grinning up at me. "If you want it." I traced the edge of the passport with one bandaged finger. The woman in the photo stared back, all sharp cheekbones and hollow eyes. I barely recognised myself. "What's the catch?" Adrian's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You marry me." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Somewhere below us, a car horn blared, the sound muffled by layers of glass and steel. "Not for love," he continued, rolling the word around his mouth like it tasted foul. "For access. Julian's running for office now. He'll be at every gala, every charity auction, places you can't go as Evelyn van der Linde's ghost." He tapped the dossier. "But as my wife, you'll be untouchable." I picked up the wedding band that sat beside the papers. Platinum, unadorned, still icy from the safe it had been stored in. And what do you get out of this? For the first time, something flickered behind his carefully curated indifference. Julian's father ruined mine, drove him to suicide with a pen stroke. He adjusted his cufflinks, the skulls winking. "I've been waiting 10 years to return the favour." The pieces clicked into place. This wasn't charity. It was a mutual annihilation pact. I slid the ring onto my finger. It fit like it had been made for me. Maybe it had. "When do we start?" Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his mouth curling at whatever he saw there. "Tomorrow, Julian just announced his engagement to Clara." He held up the phone, showing me the headline. "Tragedy to triumph. Grieving fiancé finds love again." The photo beneath it was a punch to the gut. Clara in a white sundress, Julian's arms around her, my grandmother's emerald glinting on her finger. I handed the phone back. "Perfect." Adrian raised an eyebrow. "No tears? No screaming?" I smiled for the first time since the fire. I saved that for the wedding. Outside, the city glittered, indifferent. Somewhere out there, Julian was toasting to his future. Little did he know, I was already in it. The Met Gala was a grotesque carnival of wealth, exactly the kind of place Julian would be. Preening under the flashing lights, basking in the illusion of his own importance. I stood before the floor-length mirror in my penthouse, adjusting the emerald choker at my throat. A deliberate choice. Let Clara choke on the symbolism. Adrian appeared behind me, his reflection a shadow in Armani. Nervous? I smoothed invisible wrinkles from my blood-red gown. I was born for this. The lie tasted sweet. The truth was, every step toward that gala felt like walking back into the fire. But this time, I held the match. Our arrival was calculated chaos. Paparazzi swarmed as we exited the town car, their cameras devouring the sight of Adrian Voss with a mystery woman on his arm. Whispers cut through the crowd like shrapnel. Who is she? Since when does Voss bring dates? I kept my chin high, my smile a blade sheathed in silk. Then, I saw them. Julian and Clara stood near the champagne fountain, his hand possessive on the small of her back. She wore ivory, the emerald ring glaringly obvious against her flute. My pulse roared in my ears, but my feet never faltered. Adrian's fingers tightened around mine. Breathe! I didn't need to. The moment Julian's gaze landed on me, his smile curdled. Recognition flickered. Not of my face, but of the way I held myself. The way my nails tapped against my glass in the same staccato rhythm Evelyn always had. Clara noticed first. Do we know her? She murmured, her lips barely moving. Julian's laugh was too loud. Just another social climber. Adrian guided me toward them, his voice dripping faux charm. Congressman Whitmore? What a surprise! The way Julian's jaw clenched at the name, my surname, the one he dropped the moment my will was read, was almost worth the price of admission. Adrian? Julian forced out. I didn't realize you were in town. I wasn't. Adrian's thumb stroked my wrist. But my wife insisted. The word wife landed like a grenade. Clara's grip on her champagne flute turned white-knuckled. Lydia Voss, I said, extending a hand. My grandmother's locket, the one Julian had lost weeks before the fire, swung from my wrist, catching the light. A pleasure. Julian's fingers were clammy against mine. You look familiar. I sipped my champagne, letting the silence stretch. Do I? Across the room, a waiter dropped a tray. The crash sent Julian flinching, a tiny, gratifying spasm. Adrian's lips brushed my ear. You're enjoying this too much. I watched Clara's eyes dart between my locket and my face, the first seeds of doubt taking root. Not nearly enough, I murmured back. The orchestra struck up a waltz. Adrian swept me onto the dance floor, his hand burning through the fabric at my waist. He knows. I pressed closer, my mouth a hair's breadth from his. He suspects. There's a difference. Around us, the glittering crowd swirled, oblivious to the knife slowly twisting in Julian's ribs. By the time we left, Clara was drunk and Julian was sweating through his tux. Mission accomplished. Tomorrow, the real games would begin. The Whitmore Foundation's charity auction was supposed to be Julian's crowning moment, a carefully staged display of philanthropy to bolster his Senate campaign. The ballroom dripped with orchids and self-congratulation, every surface buffed to a high gloss lie. I watched from the mezzanine, swirling my gin martini as Adrian's latest text burned in my clutch. Lot 37. Don't bid until he does. Below us, Julian worked the room with practiced ease, pressing flesh and flashing his Senate-worthy smile. Clara hovered at his elbow in a blush pink monstrosity that made her look like a frosted cupcake. I'd chosen my outfit with surgical precision, a backless black gown slit to the thigh, the emerald choker winking at my throat like a shared secret. The auctioneer announced Lot 37, Evelyn van der Linde's favourite Monet reproduction, donated from Julian's personal collection. My fingers tightened round my paddle. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll start the bidding at 20,000. 50, Julian called, oozing magnanimity. A calculated play, overbid immediately to show generosity while keeping the painting. The crowd murmured appreciatively. I waited 3 excruciating beats. 100! My voice cut through the room like shattering crystal. Every head swiveled. Julian's smile froze mid-charm. Clara's manicured claws dug into his arm. Miss Voss, the auctioneer stammered. That's most... 150, Julian's tone carried a warning. I examined my nails. 2. A reporter's camera flashed, capturing Julian's left eye twitching. Adrian materialized at my side, his presence radiating quiet menace. 200,000 to the mysterious Mrs. Voss. The auctioneer's gavel trembled. Going once. 250, Julian barked. A sheen of sweat glistened at his temples. I sighed theatrically, fluttering my paddle. Oh, darling, let him have it. I leaned into Adrian's shoulder. We'll just take the original next week. The crowd erupted in nervous laughter. Julian's face purpled. Clara's champagne flute slipped from her fingers, shattering on the parquet. Adrian guided me away as the whispers metastasized behind us. That was reckless. I trailed a finger down his lapel. That was foreplay. By midnight, 3 things happened in rapid succession. Julian stormed out mid-speech when a reporter asked why he'd sold Evelyn's belongings. Clara was photographed sobbing in the ladies' room. An anonymous tip landed in every major inbox, bank records showing Julian liquidating my estate days before the fire. Adrian cornered me near the valet, his breath hot against my nape. You moved too fast. I turned, our lips almost brushing. You wanted him rattled. Now he's radioactive. A limo pulled up, its tinted window rolling down to reveal Julian's furious glare. I blew him a kiss as we drove away. The game wasn't just rigged anymore, it was rigged in my favour. And Julian? He'd just realised he was playing against a ghost who remembered every single rule he'd broken. Adrian stopped wearing his wedding ring on Thursdays. It was such a small thing, the absence of platinum on his left hand as he poured his morning coffee, the way his fingers flexed unconsciously where the band should have been. I noticed it the same way I noticed everything now, with the hyper-awareness of a predator circling wounded prey. Lost something? I asked, nodding at his bare hand as I stirred venom into my tea. He didn't flinch. Board meeting. They're old-fashioned about marital status. A lie. I'd seen the files on his desk last night, the due diligence reports on my psychiatric evaluations, the forensic accountants tracing every dollar of my phantom inheritance. Adrian wasn't just my partner in revenge anymore. He was hedging his bets. I let the silence stretch until it frayed. We should host a dinner party. His espresso cup hesitated midair. What? For Julian and Clara? I licked jam off my thumb, slow and deliberate. Show them how happy we are. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, not quite a grimace. You're enjoying this, aren't you? He set down his cup with surgical precision. This was always business. Then why did his gaze linger on my collarbone when he thought I wasn't looking? Why had he started leaving the balcony door cracked at night, an unspoken invitation for me to slip into his bed when the nightmares came? The doorbell rang. Our caterers arrived in a flurry of white jackets and silver cloches. But the real delivery came an hour later. A slim black box addressed to Mrs. Voss. Inside nestled a pair of diamond eel earrings shaped like teardrops, the exact replica of the ones Julian had given Clara last Christmas. The card read, "For tonight's performance." A. I fastened them just as the intercom announced our guest's arrival. Adrian appeared in the foyer, his tie knotted too tight, his ring back in place. "Remember," he murmured, tucking a loose curl behind my ear. "We're in love." His palm burned through the silk at my waist as Julian and Clara crossed the threshold. Clara's gasp when she saw my earrings was worth every penny Adrian had spent. "Darling," I trilled, pressing a kiss to Adrian's cheek. His stubble scraped my lips, his heart beat erratic under my fingertips. "Our favourite people are here." Julian's smile could have cut glass. "You two look cosy." Adrian's fingers dug into my hip. We are. Over oysters and lies, I watched the cracks spread, in Clara's composure as I accidentally mentioned her emerald ring, in Julian's polished demeanour when Adrian casually referenced the SEC investigation brewing downtown. But the most fascinating fracture appeared when Adrian reached for my wine glass, his thumb brushing mine, a touch too lingering, a shade too possessive. Clara noticed first. "How long have you been together?" "Long enough," Adrian said at the same time I purred. "Not long enough." The silence that followed tasted like victory. Later, when our guests had fled and the servants had cleared the wreckage, Adrian cornered me in the pantry. "What the hell was that?" Moonlight through the high windows painted stripes across his furious face. I traced his lower lip with my thumb. "You tell me." He caught my wrist. "This isn't a game." "Then why?" I whispered, leaning in until our breaths tangled. "Are you so bad at playing it?" The ring on his finger felt like a brand as he crushed his mouth to mine. Somewhere between the bitterness and the bruising, I realised the most dangerous lies are the ones we start believing ourselves. The safe house smelled like gun oil and stale coffee, a far cry from Adrian's perfumed penthouses. I spread the documents across the scarred oak table, bank statements, surveillance photos, a coroner's report with a single damning footnote, accelerant detected in trachea. My fingers trembled, not from fear, from fury. They poured gasoline down my throat. The words came out cracked, brittle. Adrian didn't look up from his laptop. Not they, him. He spun the screen toward me. Security footage from the night of the fire showed Julian entering the library alone, a metal canister glinting in his hand. The timestamp read 8:47 p.m. I'd been laughing with the caterers at 8:46. He didn't even wait for me to leave the room. A hysterical laugh bubbled up my throat. How fucking efficient. Adrian's knuckles whitened around his pen. The insurance payout cleared his campaign debts. Clara's embezzlement vanished in the audit chaos. He tapped a photo of Julian's chief of staff, a weasel-faced man exiting a Cayman Islands bank. They planned it for months. I traced the coroner's signature with a shaking finger, and no one questioned it. You were rich, beautiful, and alone. Adrian's voice turned glacial. The perfect victim. The overhead bulb flickered, casting jagged shadows across Julian's smirking face in the surveillance stills. I wanted to claw his eyes out through the photograph. Adrian slid a final folder toward me. There's more. Inside lay blueprints of my family's estate. Every exit, every gas line, every electrical circuit, meticulously notated in Julian's precise architect's handwriting. Dated 6 weeks before the fire. He walked through my home, planning my murder. The realization hit like a sledgehammer, and I let him fuck me in every room he marked. Adrian's jaw tightened. We have enough to bury him. No. I closed the folder with deliberate calm. Burying's too kind. Outside, rain sheeted against the barred windows. Adrian's reflection loomed over mine in the darkened glass, our silhouettes merging into something monstrous. What do you want? His breath stirred the hair at my nape. I turned, our mouths inches apart. I want him to know it's me when I destroy him. Adrian's pupils dilated. That's suicide. Your face is all over the... Not this face. I pressed the stolen keycard into his palm. Julian's private elevator access, lifted from Clara's purse during our last girls' lunch. Invite him to the gala at the Van der Linde Museum. Make sure he comes alone. Adrian studied me for a long moment before nodding. And when he realizes who you are, I smiled slow and vicious. Then we'll see how brave he is when the ghost fights back. The storm outside reached a crescendo as we left, thunder shaking the foundations. Fitting, some houses deserve to burn. The Van der Linde Museum glittered with its usual pretentious opulence, all marble floors and gilded frames, the air thick with the cloying scent of imported orchids. I adjusted the pearl-handled pistol strapped to my thigh beneath the emerald green gown, its weight both comfort and provocation. Adrian's text blinked on my phone. He took the bait. Alone. Right on cue, the private elevator chimed. Julian stepped out, his Armani tuxedo impeccably tailored, his smile already rehearsed for whatever lie he planned to spin tonight. Then he saw me. The blood drained from his face so fast I could almost hear it. You! His champagne flute hit the Persian rug with a dull thud. I sipped my martini, the olive bobbing like a buoy in a storm. Miss me? His gaze darted to the portrait behind me. Evelyn van der Linde, age 24, forever smiling from her gilded prison. Back to my face. The calculations flashed behind his eyes. It can't be. The resemblance is uncanny. But she's dead. I don't know what game you're playing. Game? I laughed, low and throaty. You're the chess master, Julian. Tell me, was it checkmate when you set me on fire, or when you fucked Clara on my funeral flowers? A muscle twitched in his jaw. Prove it. I stepped closer, close enough to smell his cologne, the same fucking brand he'd worn our first night together. You keep the spare house key taped behind the Degas in your study. Clara hates oral sex, but fakes it because you're insecure. And that scar on your thigh? I pressed my palm against his groin, feeling him stiffen. You got it falling off my balcony drunk after the engagement party? His breath came in ragged bursts. Evelyn! Say my name again, I whispered, and I'll show you what a real fire looks like. The doors burst open. Flashbulbs exploded. Adrian stood, framed in the entrance, with half the press corps behind him, his smile razor-sharp. Congressman Whitmore, a reporter shouted. Care to comment on these bank records showing you paid off the fire marshal? Julian's scream of rage was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. The penthouse was too quiet after the chaos at the museum. I found Adrian on the terrace, his silhouette carved against the city lights, a half-empty bottle of Macallan dangling from his fingers. You set me up? My voice carried no accusation, just cold realization. He didn't turn. I gave you what you wanted. The wind snatched at my hair as I stepped closer. The press wasn't part of the plan. Plans change. The amber liquid caught moonlight as he swirled it. Julian's just the puppet. I needed the man pulling his strings. He tossed a folded photograph onto the glass table. The man from the Cayman Islands, Julian's weasel-faced chief of staff, shaking hands with a silver-haired titan I'd seen in my father's boardrooms. Richard Thornwood, my pulse spiked. The shipping magnate? Adrian's smile was all teeth. The man who ordered my sister's car accident. Julian's just his newest protégé. The pieces clicked with brutal clarity. My fire. His sister's wreck. Both orchestrated by the same cabal of old money predators who treated lives like ledger entries. I picked up the bottle, letting the whiskey burn its way down my throat. All this time, you weren't just using me to get to Julian. I was using Julian to get to Thornwood. His knuckles whitened around the glass. But then you walked into that gala looking like vengeance personified, and I realized what? He caught my wrist, his thumb pressing against the frantic pulse beneath my skin. That some fires shouldn't be put out. The city stretched beneath us, a glittering chessboard. Somewhere out there, Julian was scrambling. Thornwood was circling. And we? We were just getting started. Dawn hadn't yet broken when the first news alert hit my phone. I watched the pixelated footage on my screen. Julian, dishevelled but defiant, standing on the courthouse steps at 4:37 a.m., flanked by lawyers whose hourly rates could fund a small revolution. His statement oozed wounded innocence. These allegations are baseless, a political hit job orchestrated by my opponent's shadowy backers. The camera panned to the suited vulture beside him. Richard Thornwood, his silver hair impeccable, his grip on Julian's shoulder as possessive as a falconer's glove. Adrian's laptop pinged with an incoming email. The subject line, urgent, asset liquidation, glowed like a warning beacon. "They're moving money," he said, voice rough from too much whiskey and too little sleep. "Thornwood's cutting Julian loose." I scrolled through the leaked documents flooding social media. Bank transfers, encrypted emails, a damning chain of commands tracing back to Thornwood's offshore accounts. Julian had been set up to take the fall, just like Thornwood had done to Adrian's sister, just like Julian had done to me. "He'll crack under pressure," I murmured, watching Julian's left eye twitch on screen. Adrian snapped the laptop shut. "Not fast enough." The doorbell rang at precisely 6:02 a.m. The courier handed me a black envelope embossed with the Whitmore campaign seal. Inside, a single key and a note in Julian's frantic scrawl. "The boathouse. 1 hour. Come alone or Clara dies." Adrian plucked the note from my fingers. "It's a trap." "Of course it is." I slid the key into my pocket, but he's desperate enough to show his hand. The boathouse stank of mildew and bad decisions. Julian emerged from the shadows, his designer stubble now a ragged beard, his manicured nails bitten to the quick. Clara huddled in the corner, her wrists zip-tied, her mascara bleeding down her cheeks. "You ruined everything," Julian hissed, waving a Glock with shaky hands. "Thornwood's freezing my accounts. The feds are—" "Awfully chatty for a man holding a gun," I interrupted, stepping closer. "What do you want, Julian? Absolution? A head start?" The gun jerked toward Clara. "You're going to recant. Tell the press you fabricated everything." Clara whimpered. "Evelyn, please." "Oh, shut up, Clara." I rolled my eyes. "You knew about the fire. You just didn't care until it burned your manicure." Julian's finger tightened on the trigger. "I'll shoot her." "And lose your last bargaining chip," I laughed. "Even now you're terrible at math." The dock creaked behind me. Adrian materialized like a spectre, his own gun pressed to Julian's temple. "Drop it." Julian froze. Clara screamed, and Thornwood's men, 3 hulking shadows in tactical gear, stepped out of the reeds with rifles raised. "Now this," I sighed, "is getting interesting." The first shot came from the water. Julian collapsed, clutching his thigh. The would-be assassins whirled toward the new threat, a police speedboat roaring into view, its spotlight blinding. Adrian hauled me behind a support beam as chaos erupted. "You called the cops?" "No," I said, watching Thornwood's men scatter like roaches. "I called his ex-wife." On the dock, Julian sobbed into the planks. Clara kicked him in the ribs. Some betrayals, it seemed, were universal. Thornwood's yacht was a floating tomb of mahogany and lies, anchored just beyond the harbour patrol's jurisdiction. The storm raging around us made the deck slick with salt water and bad decisions. Adrian's knife pressed against the captain's jugular. "Where is he?" The man nodded toward the master suite, his pupils dilated with fear. I kicked open the door to find Thornwood pouring cognac into a crystal glass, his monogrammed robe fluttering in the wind from the shattered window. He didn't look up. "I wondered when you'd come." "Cut the Bond villain act." I slammed Julian's blood-stained confession onto the wet bar. "Your protégé sang like a canary. Embezzlement, arson, 2 counts of attempted murder." Thornwood sipped his drink. Julian always was disposable. Lightning flashed, illuminating the framed photos behind him. A younger Julian, shaking hands at a fundraiser. Adrian's sister's obituary pinned beneath a yacht racing trophy. Adrian moved first. The fight was brutal, primal, a tangle of shattered glass and stolen breath. I watched Thornwood's gold-plated pistol skitter across the teak floor, his polished facade crumbling as Adrian's fist connected with his jaw. "For Leah!" Adrian growled, dragging him toward the open window. Rain lashed my face as I picked up the gun. "Wait!" Thornwood's laugh bubbled with blood. "You won't shoot me, girl. You're not a killer." I adjusted my grip. "I'm not aiming at you." The bullet pierced the gas line. Flames erupted with a roar, licking up the velvet curtains, hungry and bright. Adrian released Thornwood. "Swim or burn, your choice." We made it to the life raft as the first explosion rocked the harbour. The fire reflected in Adrian's eyes, not an ending, but a beginning. Somewhere in the inferno, a champagne bottle popped. Poetic. The morning headline screamed with predictable drama. Tycoon perishes in yacht inferno, foul play suspected. Below the fold, a smaller headline noted Julian's plea deal and Clara's sudden relocation to a non-extradition country. The world moved on with barely a hiccup. I stood in the ruins of my family's estate, the charred beams groaning under their own weight. Adrian's footsteps crunched through broken glass behind me. "The insurance cleared," he said, handing me a check with more zeros than grief. "It's yours." I let the wind take it, watching paper flutter into the skeletal remains of the library. "Build a memorial here." "For who?" "The girl who died in this fire." I kicked a chunk of plaster, revealing a half-melted music box, the one Julian had given me for our anniversary. She deserves better than to be remembered as a pawn. Adrian's phone buzzed with an incoming call. His rebuilt company's board, no doubt demanding answers about last quarter's questionable acquisitions. He silenced it without looking. "What now?" he asked. In the distance, construction cranes swung against the sunrise, rebuilding some other millionaire's dream. I laced my fingers with his, our scars aligning perfectly. Now we live. The first wrecking ball hit the eastern wall at noon. We didn't stay to watch. Some ruins aren't meant to be preserved. Some fires don't just destroy, they make space for something new to grow. And us? We've always known how to thrive in the ashes. 1 year to the day after my death, the Voss Foundation hosted its inaugural gala in the glass-encased ruins of the Van der Linde estate. Architects had transformed the skeletal remains into something breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers suspended from blackened beams, fresh gardenias spilling from the cracks in fire-scarred walls. The invitation called it a celebration of resilience. I called it irony in couture. Adrian adjusted my diamond choker, the twin to the emerald one I'd worn when we first destroyed Julian. Nervous. His lips grazed the scar along my collarbone, the only remaining evidence of the fire. I was born for this, I said, and this time it wasn't a lie. The ballroom erupted in applause as we descended the floating staircase. Every camera lens in the city captured the moment. Lydia Voss in her blood-red gown, her billionaire husband's hand possessive at the small of her back, the ghost of Evelyn van der Linde smiling from every strategically placed portrait. Then I saw him. Julian stood near the ice sculpture, pale, thinner, his prison furlough anklet visible above polished Oxfords. The plea deal had reduced his sentence to 5 years, but the way society matrons recoiled from him now, that was a life sentence. "You invited him?" Adrian's fingers tensed on my hip. I wanted him to see. I plucked 2 flutes from a passing waiter, strolling towards my ex-fiancé with a predator's grace. Julian's breath hitched when I stopped before him. Up close, I could see the nicotine stains on his fingers, the hollows under his eyes. "You look alive?" I offered him a glass. "Thriving, even." His hand shook so badly the champagne nearly spilled. "Why show me mercy?" "Mercy?" I laughed low and throaty. "Julian, darling, this isn't forgiveness." I gestured to the room around us, to the reporters documenting his humiliation, to Adrian watching with a wolf's grin. "This is the autopsy." The orchestra struck up a waltz, the same piece that had been playing the night of the fire. Julian flinched as if struck. Adrian appeared at my side, his palm upturned. "Dance with me." On the floor, surrounded by the ruins of my past, I let Adrian spin me into the light. His lips brushed my ear. "Happy rebirthday, Lydia." Outside, fireworks exploded over the harbour. Not the timid sparklers of my old life, but great gasping blooms of crimson and gold that set the night ablaze. Julian fled by midnight. We danced until dawn. And somewhere between the last champagne cork popping and the first rays of sunlight gilding the wreckage, I realised this wasn't an ending. It was the first page of a much better story.